Good afternoon. This is John Richardson speaking with you from Toronto, Canada. Today is Tuesday, the 24th of May, 2022, at least in my part of the world, but it's Wednesday morning, May the 25th, 2022, in Australia, where I am once again chatting with the infamous Amy from Sydney. For those who follow Twitter and follow the world of general objection to FATCA and citizenship taxation. In fact, next year when I fly to Australia, I expect the moment I get off the plane to see a big billboard that says, "Welcome from Amy from Sydney." So, Amy, how are you today?
I'm well, thank you, John. How are you?
I'm okay. Now, this particular discussion that we're having today, it's very important to recognize that it is for and on behalf of the American Expat Financial News Journal, one more in a series of important podcasts that I have been doing and continue to do for them. Now, that said, you and I have had a couple of podcasts in the past, and they were great podcasts. They introduced Amy from Sydney became a household name, I think, because of them. But I think that it'd be great as a reminder, what in the world happened to you in 2020 that started you down this journey?
Well, in a nutshell, my local bank right here in Australia advised me that unless I provide them with a social security number, they were going to block access to my Australian bank account. From there, I had to go get a social security number because, as you can tell from my accent, I've actually never lived in America. And from there, I learned all about citizen taxation and the horrors that are facing all of us, as well as what a number of people have already gone through. So I've met a lot of great people on Twitter and various other forums, and we're all working together to end citizenship-based taxation as well as ending FATCA.
So, I mean, the way you put it, I mean, I just have to ask you the following question. So, I mean, are you saying that the discovery of citizenship taxation and FATCA has somehow enhanced your life?
I'm saying the people I have met through this have enhanced my life. I'd really rather have met you all under better circumstances, though.
Well, there are a few circumstances in life that are as bad as that. And speaking of the word circumstances, when Barack Obama was president, he once famously said, "The circumstances of somebody's birth should not determine the outcome of their life."
Now, well, what he did to me with FATCA.
Well, that's right. I mean, FATCA was not a very nice thing to do, was it?
I didn't think so. And worst of all for me was, as a citizen abroad, I actually really liked Obama at that time. It's uncomfortable discussion, but I've often found that Americans get a little bit of pushback in the communities in which we live. Actually, as a small child, I was even bullied for being the American kid. And as you can see from this accent, that's probably not entirely an American kid. But Barack Obama, I felt, really kind of helped ease some of those issues. He came across as very charming, very calm, very warm and welcoming. And he wasn't like a bull in a china shop. So for all those years, I thought he was so good. And everybody I knew thought he was so good. But then look at this. Turned out he had a knife in all of our backs the whole time.
Well, yeah, that certainly is true. I mean, the oh my God moment and the life changes caused by it in the lives of many people have, I think in all seriousness have, made Americans abroad the most important and loudest sort of voice of anti-Americanism there is on the planet.
I would agree with that.
There's a strong sense of, I think, I'd be interested in your views of this. I mean, do you feel completely betrayed?
Yes, definitely.
Could you elaborate on that a bit?
Well, America puts itself out there as being the most democratic country in the world, run by the people, for the people. And this citizenship taxation is, in my opinion, a form of theft. And FATCA, as a tool of that, it has ruined a lot of lives of a lot of Americans abroad, forcing people to renounce just so that they can get a bank account where they live. Fancy having to give up the citizenship of your birth, which is what a lot of people have had to do. Wow.
Absolutely. In my view, a lot of people agree, but there are, in fairness, there are some who don't agree. I think that people are absolutely being forced to renounce their U.S. citizenship over this issue. Would you agree?
It is very much a forced action. It's not like they decided, you know what, I just don't identify as being American anymore. They were forced.
Yeah, and I think the proof that they're being forced is that, they're willing to pay, significant money, 2,350 US dollars. Some people are willing to fly halfway around the world. They're so desperate. I understand that the consulates in Australia, where you are closed and are not doing renunciations.
That's right.
Terrible, terrible thing.
It is. So if I decided I wanted to renounce, or if I found myself in a spot where, thanks to banking or whatever, I needed to renounce, I would have a serious problem on my hands.
Well, a lot of your countrymen do have serious problems on their hands, and a lot of people around the world do have serious problems. The backlog to renounce U.S. citizenship is, nobody knows what the real numbers are, but I can tell you that it is certainly significant. And it's very, very costly to a lot of people. They've got the renunciation fee. Many of them are flying halfway around the world, and many of them are willing to pay a substantial exit tax, to rid themselves of, of what has become the albatross. I think that's the kindest thing you could say. And for many, the cancerous tumor of American citizenship and how it's upended people's lives. It's an extraordinary thing. Let's be clear. You do not leave the land of the free for free.
Definitely not, especially if you weren't even born in that land. But it is very unfair. But a lot of these people may not even be able to afford what they're paying, but they have to do it, because how else are they going to get a bank account? How else are they going to get a mortgage or all these other things that they need? It's ruining them financially to renounce, but they just have to do it.
Yeah, it is truly extraordinary. And, I've been sort of working on this project for over 10 years now. And, at the beginning, I really thought that, that some common sense would prevail, that these laws would change. But here we are in 2022, and there's no evidence at all that the laws are changing, is there?
And there's no evidence that they're even considering changing them.
Yeah, it's pretty clear that they don't care. But it's far worse than that. It's not only that they don't care, it's they clearly just don't care that they don't care.
You said that one a few times, John, and I agree with you completely.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, there are pockets of people around the world, not a lot, okay, interestingly, but there are pockets of people around the world who are trying to, through a combination of education, motivation, perspiration, what have you, trying to get these, bring some political pressure to try to get this stuff changed. And, I think that we really ought to talk about political change, what happened this past weekend, and all that sort of thing. So, when we look at political change, Ronald Reagan used to say, if we can't make them feel the light, we surely are going to make them feel the heat. So, there have been efforts to try to get legislative change, but where do you go to get legislative change? How do you do that? How do you influence Congress? How do you influence Treasury? What about, the whole issue of Democrats abroad, for example?
Yes. Well, I have personally written quite a number of letters to various politicians and various officials in America regarding citizenship-based taxation. I've also emailed people, and as you know, I've tweeted at a lot of people and participated in those online discussions. But last week, when I heard that the Democrats abroad were going to debate and vote on whether they would go for FATCA repeal or FATCA reform, that was the point where I finally decided, you know what, I'll join DA out of support for this, and I will watch that meeting out of support for the people within DA who are pushing for this. Because if DA would adopt FATCA reform, although that does not encompass full-blown resident-based taxation, which we're really going for, if they would go for FATCA repeal instead of FATCA reform, that would be a great step in the right direction of getting Congress to see what people are going through abroad.
Okay. Now obviously, you're sort of preaching the converted here. I agree. Well, you know that.
We do know
I think
that.
it might be a good moment to talk about the difference between CBT and FATCA and how they're related, because I think that this is a very confusing issue for people. FATCA has sort of become the word to describe the whole problem. And, certainly I don't think that's the case. I mean, what's your view on that?
I think we need to be very careful in using the terminology. And over the past few months, I've noticed a big change in that, particularly online, in terms of how people describe the situation. Up until recently, people have always talked about FATCA as being the problem. But FATCA is actually more of, for want of a better description, a symptom of the problem, because FATCA is the tool used by the US government, or one of the tools, to try and enforce citizenship-based taxation.
All right, now let me pause you there again, okay?
Right.
I think that's absolutely right. So your view is that the real problem then is citizenship taxation, correct?
Absolutely. We wouldn't have the problem with FATCA if it wasn't for it.
All right, yeah, okay. So just, I think it might be a good moment to describe what is citizenship taxation anyway.
Well, as it was explained to me through the various resources and people I spoke to when I first joined this, citizenship-based taxation requires us all to report all of our income and assets to the IRS on an annual basis, and we are potentially, in some cases, actually taxed on our non-US income and our non-US assets, owing to the fact that we are citizens of the United States of America.
Okay, so would you agree with the following, that what citizenship taxation is a requirement that US citizens, in addition to reporting US source income, are actually required to report their non-US source income as being taxable to the United States, and their non-US assets are mostly reportable to the United States. Would you agree with that?
That is how I understand it, yes.
I think that's exactly what it is. So in other words, what citizenship taxation means is that the United States is actually imposing worldwide taxation on people who live in other countries as tax residents of those other countries.
Yes.
On their non-US source income, right?
Yes.
Wow. That's pretty amazing stuff, don't you think?
I'm amazed.
Tell me the truth now, Amy. Do you feel sort of privileged? Like when you sit down with your friends in Sydney and you're sitting there having a beer and they say, well, these taxes in Australia are outrageous. And you say, well, I proudly can claim that not only am I subject to Australian taxes, but by God, I'm also subject to US taxes. So I'm better than you.
Well, first things first, John, my friends know I'm really beer drinkers, we're wine drinkers.
Okay.
But jokes aside.
What kind of wine?
Oh, we mix it up sometimes. Red, white, rosé, sparkling even sometimes. There'll be champagne whenever they get rid of citizenship taxation. But no, my friends here actually can't believe me when I tell them this. They always tell me, Amy, double check it. That can't be right. There's no way. And eventually, as it sinks in, every single person I tell has the same reaction. They think I'm insane, then they go to, oh no, that can't be right. You must need to double check it. And eventually it's like, oh my God, Amy, you need to renounce. And that's the part where I tell them how hard, if not impossible, it is to renounce. And a lot of us may actually not want to renounce anyway.
Well, why would anybody want to renounce any citizenship?
Well, the whole point of having a citizenship is to be able to be connected with that country for the purpose of travel and visiting family and things.
Mhm.
The only reason I've got US citizenship really at this stage is because I have a US born parent, and that parent's whole family is over there. And mind you, I've been kind of naughty and I haven't bothered to go to America for over 2 years. But
My God.
if I ever needed to go, I could go.
Mhm. All right. Well, it's interesting that, so as a resident of Australia who happened to have a US citizen mother, that's really it, isn't it? I mean,
It-
why not just tax people with brown eyes or blue eyes or something? I mean, aren't they both fairly arbitrary and,
Pretty much.
sort of immutable characteristics, things you're kind of born with?
Pretty much.
But it's kind of interesting here, right? We look at the US tax system, which is just, I mean, so indescribably idiotic and unfair. Okay. So we have a situation where Amy from Sydney, okay, is required to, well, to put it very succinctly, who earns income in Australia, and that Australian income is taxable by the US. Now, whether you end up paying tax on it or not, it's a different issue, but it's clearly taxable and you're clearly required to file. But yet, you've got people in the United States who, Warren Buffett would always say, I mean, I pay a lower tax rate than my secretary. Do you get like a preferred lower tax rate because you live in Australia?
No.
There's nothing in the Internal Revenue Code with the Amy from Sydney tax rate.
No, I'm not aware of the US allowing people from Sydney to get a special lower tax rate.
All right, so I mean, it's really extraordinary, isn't it? And then, of course, the very punitive taxation of, Australian financial accounts and that. I mean, it's pretty clear that not only is the US taxing people who are tax residents of other countries, but they're actually imposing a far more punitive tax system on them, right? So, in
Right.
other words, maybe you think about it like this. Every other country in the world, you don't live in the United States or you leave the United States, you cease being taxable. But when it comes to the United States, you leave, not only are you still taxable, but you're taxed worse.
Yes.
The
It's
American way, yes?
it is horrendous.
Well, it's clearly the American way. Now, so there are people who find these things objectionable. There's Amy from Sydney and maybe a few others. Okay. But it's interesting that when people recognize they need to get political change. So they think in terms of, let's go to our political organizations, like the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. And, these people from Democrats abroad are really out making their presence known, aren't they? You can vote
Oh,
for the Democrats, yes?
yeah, I see it every single day. They're pushing for more and more voting from abroad.
So you would say that they're definitely trolling for votes from abroad, right?
Definitely.
Mhm. Okay. So, this is this group called Democrats Abroad, and Democrats Abroad, I mean, there are members of Democrats Abroad who, really find fact on citizenship taxation objectionable. There are some,
There are some.
and others perhaps not. I mean, it runs the whole spectrum of humanity. But there is this Democrats Abroad tax committee, right? That is at least drawing attention to this problem and working on it. And they did something I thought that was really remarkable this year. What do you want to pick it up from here? Their suggestion.
Um, they did a few weeks ago offer that survey to us all where we were asked about our opinions on citizenship taxation. I did fill that out. I'm looking forward to seeing the results of that. I'm not sure when they're going to be out,
Would
but
you anticipate that the results will be that people feel that citizenship taxation is important so that they feel they're valued as American citizens?
I believe that would be the number one thing, yes.
Mhm. Okay. Well, what they did do, interestingly, is the Democrats Abroad Tax Committee apparently was trying to get a resolution to repeal FATCA, which I thought was quite interesting on a number of levels. What was your impression of that?
A very positive impression. As I said, though, removing FATCA doesn't actually get us away from the other problem of citizen taxation, but it would be a great step, especially for those who can't get banking services where they live. So I really appreciated that the task force went for that. That was the reason I took the step and finally joined Dems Abroad, because I wanted to attend that meeting where it was going to be debated and voted on.
That's amazing. So you actually went so far as to join Democrats Abroad.
I feel a little misled now.
Did you feel good when you joined? Did you feel that you were part of a new organization?
I'm going to be honest, I felt a little apprehensive, but also a little bit hopeful. I didn't really feel good because there is that history between a number of us and Dems Abroad of not seeing eye to eye on these issues. But I figured if they're going to extend some kind of an olive branch, I'm extending one too.
Well, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I think in fairness, everybody would have to agree that, I mean, sure, they could have gone, maybe they could have gone further, but I think everybody would agree that pitching FATCA repeal to DA, the broader organization DA, would be, it's clearly responsive to the needs of Americans abroad, right?
Well, I think so. I would have thought, yeah.
Okay, so basically, that was clearly on the agenda, and that was what, Sunday morning, would have been about 6 a.m. I think, Toronto,
Yes,
whatever, and
6 a.m. Their time.
so you were, I mean, you're a DA member, so I take it you were listening in on the meeting, is that right?
Yes, I dialed in at 8 p.m. Sydney time, which is 6 a.m. their time, and I stayed on that call for 4 hours.
What did you hear?
Nothing really that even remotely linked to tax. They were talking about amending a document. They were voting on sometimes whether or not to debate things, but they just seemed to drag it out and drag it out and drag it out. There are a couple of other things that did actually bother me from that meeting. They mentioned a member who had recently passed away. The person who gave the memorial speech was capped out at 1 minute. She requested more time and somebody objected. So their own member who passed away, who probably had friends in the organisation, was worth a maximum of 1 minute. I was left gobsmacked by that.
That is pretty disgusting, isn't it?
If I worked with somebody and they died, I would want that person's memorial to go a little longer than a minute. Especially with all the other time they found for, like, as far as I could tell, was just faffing about. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't get onto the things that really mattered, that made a difference to Americans abroad. Couldn't take a minute or 2 minutes for their own member who probably deserved a bit more respect than that. And another thing that bothered me was the length of that meeting without breaks. One woman at some point got on and said, can we please have a break because of how long we've been going? And they started even before I joined. As far as I know, John, they went the whole 10 hours with maybe one break. Maybe. That is not safe. You cannot do that.
Well,
no,
maybe they weren't taking the break because they understood the importance of getting to the FATCA issue to discuss it, right?
Maybe. I would imagine that the people who were there for FATCA probably very much would have held that view, considering they would have had to stay on the call the entire time until they got called up. I doubt they moved anywhere.
Mhm. Well, ultimately, as we know, they adjourned the meeting before discussing the FATCA issue. Before discussing the issue that really would matter to individual Americans abroad, right?
Right. It's the only issue on which it's the only issue they had on the agenda that I saw that actually does impact Americans abroad. Everything else they had was directed at homelanders.
Well, I mean, let's talk about Democrats abroad, for a minute. The name Democrats abroad would suggest that it's an organization to recognize and promote and educate about the interests of Americans abroad, right?
Yes, I would have thought so.
Uh, Clearly, it's not that at all, is it?
No, as I'm starting to kind of see in recent times that I think their central role is to promote the US government to Americans abroad, whereas we would like them to promote our abroad issues to the government.
In other words, it's the opposite of what it should be. And to that, I mean, very, very clearly, I mean, I don't think this is at all controversial. That if you look online, I think it would seem to me that the primary interaction that they have with individuals is to try to get them to go out and vote for Democrats, right?
That's right. They
So
want
in
us
other
to
words,
vote Democrat.
so in other words, they think that it's perfectly okay to market the idea of voting for Democrats to individual Americans abroad while simultaneously not addressing the only issues that matter to Americans abroad. Would you agree with that statement?
Yes, and I have told them many times online that that's a mistake because I really question the Democrats' ability to win over the abroad community without first, at the very least, taking some serious steps towards fixing citizen taxation and FATCA. Those things have to be done first before they get our loyalty.
But how do you explain that? They claim that, in the presidential election, that it was what they call the overseas vote was responsible for delivering Arizona and Georgia to Biden. I mean, how do you explain that then? Clearly, people are voting for Democrats anyway, right?
Well, that's only two states, but I mean, I don't know that much about Arizona and Georgia, but there could have been other factors at play. Hey, maybe people just really didn't like the Republican candidate and just threw a vote at the Democrats to get rid of that person. I don't know. But it's only two states and they need to focus on the others as well.
Well, they certainly do, but I mean, I think they need to. You would think that they would recognize the importance of focusing on the needs of individual Americans abroad who are
Yeah,
Democrats, wouldn't you?
I would think so. And especially if they're calling on us to vote for them, they owe us a certain loyalty to do something to stop that US government from doing things that hurt us.
Well, and the simple fact of the matter is that over the weekend they had this meeting that went on for 10 hours. They were supposed to discuss the issue of FATCA, and they ended the meeting before discussing. And this is just a simple fact, isn't it?
It is a simple fact and one that has really ticked off Twitterland in the past 48 hours.
Well, and as Ronald Reagan used to say in his speeches, facts are stubborn things.
Well, it's true. And what good would it be for them to come back to us today after that performance and say, oh, you are one issue voters, or you've still got to vote from abroad because we don't like the Republicans? We don't live in America. The majority of us are unconcerned whether the Democrats or the Republicans are in charge in America, as long as whoever's in charge doesn't do massive damage to the place. That's kind of the only stipulation. But I see no reason why I should have loyalty to one political party or another on the other side of the world, which is what America is to me. I've never even lived there. So if somebody did do something to fix this issue for us, I probably would, out of gratitude, have a think about that and possibly vote for them if I'm eligible, if I can. And even if I can't, I would spruik that to my family and my friends who live there, who can definitely vote. Because if somebody cares enough to fix a massive issue that's going on, then they probably care enough to do things to help others as well.
Well, where do you think, where do you think this whole thing is going to go? I mean, do you think that the failure of DA on the weekend to address this FACTA issue is going to have long run implications?
Yes, I do. I think they really shot themselves in the foot because they have alienated the abroad community by that one single act. And I think I expect that it will cost them votes in upcoming elections because people are going to feel cheated and be less trusting towards the DA as a wider group. I also expect that this may actually fire up quite a few citizens abroad who will see this as a real slight and may start looking for other avenues to get our message out. And I expect some of those avenues to be pushing towards media personalities for help and, increased activity on social media. I know that's certainly got its limits, but they will go for anything that they can get their hands on to try and get this out, because we do know that this isn't going to be dealt with the way we need it to be dealt with. We need to be looking elsewhere. People may even start pushing for Republicans overseas to assist. Hey, even I got back on their post a few days ago and said, look, Dems abroad didn't do it. Can you help us? We're just going to go looking for other avenues. We're not going to accept this.
Well, I think what it clearly underscores is the fact that Democrats Abroad is not an organization that exists for Americans abroad. That is crystal clear. And that I don't think that's controversial. And I think people need to keep that in mind. Tell me about US Voters Abroad, this new thing you're involved in.
Well, US Voters Abroad is a group of individuals. At this stage, we're still quite small. We're in the business of, I shouldn't even say business, that probably attracts a tax thing, doesn't it? Our focus is on...
Maybe you can generate some losses.
Maybe we can. Well, our focus is on trying to encourage citizens abroad to think before they vote. We're not saying do vote. We're not saying don't vote. We're saying think.
And you're not saying who to vote for if you vote.
Yes, like research your candidates, make sure they're aligned with what you believe rather than just listening to what you're told. Take the time to ask your candidates about their views on citizen taxation and ask them what they're going to do to help. And for goodness sake, do not waste your vote on somebody who's going to hurt you. We've got a Facebook group and we've got a Facebook page up and running where we're kind of slow on getting those things going, but we are working on it. As I said, there's only a small number of us. We've also got a Twitter page. We're in the process of trying to get Instagram started. So big shout out if anyone's listening. We're looking for somebody to run the Instagram page. And if anybody's any good at making memes, please hit us up. And
so where would people find online? What would be an address or addresses, coordinates for US Voters Abroad?
Voters Abroad, you can find it on Facebook just by typing in Voters Abroad. And you'll
Voters
find
Abroad or US Voters Abroad?
Sorry, what was that?
Voters Abroad or US Voters Abroad?
That will be US Voters Abroad. Yeah, if you just type those in, you'll find those easily enough.
Okay, well, that's, so that's a great individual initiative, I guess, to try to educate and bring people together on this problem. I mean, I've got to say that, I mean, well, for a long time, I've thought that, a political solution to this would be extremely challenging, but certainly the just, flagrant, uh, you know, uh, lack of recognition of the importance of dealing with this at that DA meeting, it just shocks the conscience, doesn't it?
Well, I would have thought that at an abroad group meeting, the abroad issue would have been the very top of the agenda. It never should have been placed at the bottom to begin with. And then it got ousted in favour of other issues that I'm sure they're just homeland issues. The homeland issues are important, yes, but you've got to represent the abroad people. No one else is helping us. We need these groups helping us.
Well, they have there's no inclination. I mean, this has been going on for years now. And there appears to be no inclination whatsoever on the part of a DA to represent the interests of individual Americans abroad, or even as a group. I mean, because now again, to be clear, okay, the task force is a different thing, the tax force.
Yes.
To be sure, and those people, deserve, I think a serious shout out for their efforts. But God, I mean, they're swimming upstream in this, under the weight of this organization as well. What do you think that Democrats abroad should be called? What? I mean, they're not Democrats abroad. What are they? The organization to get votes from overseas people in support of the homeland.
Yeah, they are more aligned with that. Like that vote from abroad group.
Well, anyway, I get a sense that you were deeply, deeply disappointed. I mean, you joined DA to be able to listen to this. You listened for 4 hours. I mean, the way you describe it, it sounds like, the disappointment that a young child would feel waiting for a parent to, pick them up and take them somewhere, and, the parent not to show up. I mean, is that sort of?
Yeah. It is along that kind of vein of disappointment there, definitely. I was waiting anxiously for that debate and discussion to start all night, and it never even started. I really thought that this was going to be the start of, everybody uniting together to try and go in one direction to try and tackle this problem.
Well, yeah, and I mean, in fairness, again, I mean, let's again say, okay, the DA task force deserves a real shout out for this, and I think showing courage in this issue.
Yes, definitely.
They're clearly up against the broader organization. There's no doubt about that. Well, okay, the saga continues. So, you're becoming an internet celebrity. I mean, where would people find you online?
Oh, I'll never be as much of an internet celebrity as you are, John, but thank you. It's always a pleasure when coming on your show.
Well, seriously, what's your Twitter handle?
It is Amy from Sydney.
There's some dashes in there, aren't there? Amy _from Sydney.
Amy _from Sydney. Amy from Sydney.
Exactly. The face of Americans abroad.
Ironically, my profile picture that I've got on Twitter at the moment is actually a very famous lady from Sydney who actually took on some guy she probably shouldn't have taken on in hindsight. But she was an activist from the 1970s who fought to keep low-cost housing in place in a rather poor area of Sydney at the expense of developers who wanted to take over the place. And the rumour is that she's buried underneath the Coca-Cola sign in King's Cross. Yeah, it's a horrific story. She did everything she could to try and help, and she got on the wrong side of the wrong gangsters who were affiliated with developers. Juanita
Well,
Nielsen was.
what would the modern day analogy be? Getting on the wrong side of the banks affiliated with the Fat Commission, I guess, or something.
I do think that if Juanita was alive today, I imagine she would probably see this and say, no, you all take that on.
Mhm.
She was a very inspiring lady.
Well, I think that you're very inspiring. So,
Oh.
I mean, maybe, basically, you are the reincarnation.
Oh, wouldn't that be nice?
Well, I mean, it would mean that there would be a picture of
To
you.
have her guts to grunt would be next level. I would love that. Somehow I don't think I would have walked into the carousel club knowing that those guys were there like she did, but wow.
Well, amazing stuff. A very, very serious problem that continues on. And like you, I think that individual Americans, I mean, even if they're not, even if they're going to, sort of let their fear get the better of them and stay underground, I think they ought to think long and hard about how to use their vote on this thing.
Definitely, because when you vote, you need to consider the repercussions of your vote. It may not go the way you want. So you can only do so much research anyway and still be deceived, but research everything you can, ask the questions you can. Don't let yourself.
Can I just ask you a simple question? How in the world could it help any individual U.S. citizen outside the United States to vote for a party that is committed to FATCA and citizenship taxation?
I see no way that could be in any way helpful.
Well, sad but true, I think, isn't it? Yeah.
And yet they hit us up with things like one issue voters to try and shame us into complying with their wishes. And when they've said it to me, I just said, yes, I am a one issue voter.
Gosh,
Because
they should be ashamed of themselves. They should be ashamed of themselves, for their behavior. All right. So bringing this to a close, what is your final message? Your final message to anybody you want in the world?
Well, I suppose I would probably say to my friends and family, hey, how you going? But I would love to just say thank you to everybody who worked so hard to present FATCA repeal on that meeting the other night. I'm sorry you didn't get to have your say.
Absolutely. The DA task force. Yeah, sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely. And I would also like to say to the people who stopped these folks from having their say, please take a second look at that. This situation is hurting a lot of people and it may one day hurt you too. So don't block this again. And to all the others who are feeling very discouraged today, I know there's, from what I've seen on Twitter and what I've participated, there's a lot of people licking wounds. I'd say let's take this moment to kind of feel the way we're feeling. It is disappointing. It is hurtful. Let's go through that. And then we're going to come out the other side. We're going to have to find other ways to keep going. Let's not let this be a failure to us.
Well, I think that there's actually a silver lining here as well. I think it makes it pretty clear that any resolution of this through the Democrats as a party is not going to be happening. So
doesn't look good, does it?
No, absolutely not. So, that needs to be, in other words, step up, work on it yourself, assume that you're not going to get any help from the parties.
Yes.
Which I think is an important message here. I think far too many people think, well, this group will solve this problem or that group will solve this problem. And nobody's going to solve this problem but the individuals who are affected by it, I think.
I think so too.
All right. Well, this has been great. It's towards the end of my day and the start of your day. And are you going to drink wine today?
I'm off to work.
Oh my God. Sorry, I am. Okay.
You start work in a few minutes.
All right. Well, thanks so much. And
Thank you, John. It's
great
nice
to catch up with you again. Our ongoing, sort of the ongoing discussions with Amy from Sydney, the citizen, sorry, the symbol, if you will, of the resistance to citizenship taxation.
Oh, I don't think anybody's, I haven't done that much yet. I just get out there and do what I can. You all have done so much more.
Hey, if you're doing all you can, that's more than almost everybody. All right, Amy, thank you so much.
Thank you, John.
Or I should say thank you again so much. And I look forward to our next update.
Sure.